Hi everyone, and welcome back to the George Collection. I'm Rachel Rightside Blonde. With all this talk of scandal and corruption, I thought this would be a good time to bring back the conspiracy issue from October of 1998. In particular today, I wanted to read you the story of the mysterious death of Jim McDougal and how that plays into this book, George's Book of Political Lists. Before we discuss the book, let's read the article. The mysterious death of Jim McDougal. He ratted on Bill Clinton and then died doing time in a Texas prison. Now, new evidence raises disturbing questions about the federal government's role in McDougal's untimely demise. One thing I'd like to point out before I start reading the actual article is that there is a picture of Jim McDougal in a powder blue suit, and the headline is the powder blue color as well. Could mean nothing, could mean something. I'll let you decide. Here's the article. Inmates say James B. McDougal had a certain strut when he walked into the Federal Medical Center prison in Fort Worth in August 1997. He was, after all, a famous witness who claimed to have information that could bring down the president. He told me they had to treat him with kid gloves because of his celebrity status in the Whitewater investigation, says Darren Williams, an inmate who befriended McDougal while they were housed at this facility for criminals with health problems. McDougal relished what would surely be a starring role in any trial against the Clintons. The 57-year-old would sit in the TV room, his arm draped around an empty seat, Williams recalls. Somebody would come up and ask, "Is this seat taken?" And he'd say, "Sir, this seat is saved for my friend Bill." While the independent counsel chased a trail of presidential lust and possible high crimes earlier this year, McDougal tackled his new mission, working the prison's garbage detail. Though scheduled for release in September 1999, McDougal went before the parole board in February. He could have been home by late April. But on March 8th, McDougal collapsed suddenly in the silence of a solitary confinement cell and was declared dead an hour later. Who does that remind you of? An autopsy revealed the cause to be a massive heart attack, and the death was therefore ruled as natural. McDougal was in the disciplinary segregation unit, known to prisoners as the Hole, because he was being punished for not urinating in a cup for a random drug test. At first, the death seemed to be an unexceptional, if lonely, end for a man who once moved easily among powerful political figures. After all, he had long suffered from numerous heart and circulatory ailments. But it's the easy questions the U.S. Bureau of Prisons refuses to answer that raise suspicions about McDougal's treatment in the hours before his death. Who made the decision to send him to an isolated cell? The BOP won't say. The Bureau did conduct an internal review after the death, so why won't it release the report? The BOP also won't comment or provide ambulance and emergency room records, names of prison staff who attended to McDougal, or a host of other information. Even the prison warden is forbidden to speak. More troubling is the information George has received from a confidential prison source who says McDougal complained of dizziness the day before his death. The prison, even though there's a clinic on site, did not conduct a thorough medical examination. When asked about this, Todd Craig, chief BOP spokesman in Washington, D.C., pauses for several seconds and then says, "I'll have to get back to you." He never did. All of which raises the question, did the Bureau of Prisons do something wrong in the case of Jim McDougal? Craig says guards told McDougal on March 7th that he would have to take a drug screening test. McDougal was not suspected of taking illicit drugs. His name, says Craig, had simply appeared at random on a computer-generated list. It was the second time in 5 months that McDougal had been selected for a drug screen. On October 23, 1997, he had told the guards that his medications for a bad heart and depression prevented him from urinating during the prison-imposed 2-hour time limit. The excuse was not accepted. McDougal was placed in isolation for 7 days. Then, on March 7th, at about 4 p.m., McDougal again told guards that he could not provide a sample within 2 hours. Craig says the guards gave McDougal water to help him. In recognition of his situation, the staff worked with him for over 6 hours to allow him every opportunity to provide a sample, Craig reports. He drank a sufficient amount. By 10:30 p.m., McDougal still had not been able to perform, and he was sent to a 14 by 8-foot cell in the Hole. Craig says he was checked every 30 minutes by guards, and McDougal never complained of feeling ill. Twice during his solitary confinement, he was given his medication. During a 10:30 a.m. head count, guards looked in on McDougal. He was observed to be fine, Craig says. At 10:55 a.m., guards were preparing to deliver brunch. McDougal was on the floor moaning, the spokesman says. A doctor, a nurse, and 2 medical assistants were summoned. At 12:01 p.m., McDougal was declared dead at Fort Worth's John Peter Smith Hospital. The prison staff acted properly in providing for the medical care and custody of Mr. McDougal, Craig insists. But a confidential source, who is an official at the prison, gave George an account that directly contradicts a key element of Craig's version of the story. McDougal was sicker than prison officials admit. The day before he died, McDougal complained of being dizzy, says the source. Guards called for a medical staff member known as a physician's assistant who examined the distressed McDougal, but the doctor on duty never responded to McDougal's complaint. They left him where he was. McDougal's friend Williams also contradicts the BOP on several points. At 8 p.m. the night before he died, McDougal was seen in a hospital lobby, Williams says. Jim was sitting on a bench inside this area. He was smiling and talking to people, saying, "Hey, I couldn't pee in the bottle." The people said he was in good spirits, but kind of pissed off. McDougal was then taken to the hole, and Williams reports 2 inmates in an adjacent cell told him that McDougal asked guards for his medication. First he was civil, then as things progressed, he was kicking his door, yelling for his heart medication, but they kept turning him down, Williams says, adding that 2 guards were playing cards less than 10 feet from McDougal's cell. He finally received some medication the next morning, Williams says. But Williams learned that later that morning, guards were rushing about, a sense of urgency in their voices. "Are you going to give him mouth-to-mouth?" one of the guards asked. Williams says that one of the officers started going around and taping newspaper over the cell windows so the other inmates couldn't see what was going on. The confidential source says the guards sounded the man down alert, and a medical team rushed to McDougal's side. They worked feverishly for a half hour to revive him, pounding on his chest, placing a tube down his throat, and strapping a monitor to his body. There's always a lot of people around when somebody's down like that. That's the life and death effort. Everybody knew who this was, and that created a lot of tension. They knew they were going to catch flack from upper management, and from the warden, the source says. After McDougal died, according to the official, tension spread throughout the prison and up to BOP headquarters in Washington. BOP officials quickly began to worry about how the prison had handled McDougal's complaints of dizziness, the source says. Everybody was nervous. McDougal had no family. One of the few friends he left behind says she doesn't have the resources to press the BOP for answers about what happened during his final hours in jail. "If I were a family member, I would crusade," says Claudia Riley, 70. "If this had happened to my husband or child, I would be compelled to find more answers." The second page of this article also has some powder blue in it. One other thing I want to point out is that on the autopsy photo shown here, I'll spare you the picture, but it says it was taken on 3/9/98. So 39 is one of their numbers. It's 13 times 3. Got to multiply something by 3 to give it the maximum power. Don't ask me, I don't believe in this stuff, but I'm just pointing it out to you. And then 9 plus 8 is 17. So are they trying to send a message with this date on the autopsy picture? Perhaps, but I'll let you decide. As far as the book of political lists go, I'm going to share with you some interesting lists that were featured inside of this book. So how was the story of Jim McDougal inside this George magazine connected to political lists inside of the George book? I hope you caught the connection. That does it for this episode of the George Collection. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time.
Magazine, George, which is a hoot of a magazine. I thought you were a lawyer.
I was.
What happened?
Well, we decided, actually taking a cue from folks like yourself and you around the 1992 election, that there was an opportunity here to change the definition of a political magazine. Certainly the way Americans were accessing information about politics and politicians was changing. Candidates were appearing on late-night talk shows, on talk radio, on sitcoms, and there was a kind of a leveling process, and while the rest of media clearly had caught up with that, we felt that political magazines per se hadn't.
Your mother was a hell of an editor at Doubleday.
That's what I hear.
Would she have liked George?
I think she would have.